A thesis defense can feel like a disaster while it is actually going reasonably well. You see, when we're nervous, we could easily misread the situation. So in this video, I will share with you 6 signs that your thesis defense may be going better than you think. First, you are nervous but still giving substantive answers. Many students think that nervousness itself is a sign that things are not going well, and I can understand that. I'm feeling nervous and tense, my voice is shaking, I may be stuttering a little bit, I am not sounding as smooth as I want to. So I conclude that things are going badly. But that's not necessarily true. Everyone gets nervous. That's completely normal for a thesis defense. Most examiners don't really care about that. The real question is, are you still answering the questions? So despite the nervousness and the less than smooth delivery, if you are still answering the questions substantively, explaining your choices, motivating and justifying your decisions, engaging with the content, the defense may be going better than it feels. Examiners care a great deal about the substance of your research. So a nervous but substantive answer is much better than a confident but empty one. And these days, one of the main functions of the thesis defense is to check, did the student perform the research or did an AI tool do it for the student? So if you are able to substantively address the questions and clearly explain the content of your research, you know that matters so much more than sounding smooth or elegant. And that's why I say, despite your nervousness, if you are still thinking, explaining, and answering the questions, that is a very good sign. Second, the examiners are listening to you and giving you space to explain. When you are answering the questions, if the examiners are genuinely listening to you, looking at you, maintaining eye contact, occasionally nodding, maybe jotting some things down or typing some notes, giving you time and letting you finish, these are very much indicative that you are doing well, that you are making sense, that you are saying things which are meaningful and relevant. Because if you are not making sense, it's very likely the examiners would interrupt you or even shut you down and then re-ask their question. Of course, this could be culture and context specific, and that you shouldn't read too much into this. But in general, if the examiners are genuinely and actively listening to you, that is indicative that the interaction is positive and constructive. A defense is not a monologue on your part. It's a conversation. So the nonverbal signs on the part of the examiners are a meaningful indicator of how things are going. So, if the examiners are paying attention to you, really listening to your answers, there is meaningful interaction, and that is a sign that things are going well. Third, the examiners help fill the silence when you struggle. This is a subtle and interesting one, and in my experience, it's often true. If you are struggling a little bit in the thesis defense, you don't quite know how to best answer the question, you cannot find the right words, there is this silence in the room. And then the examiner says something like, what I'm really asking is this or that. Perhaps think about it in relation to this or that. Or you don't have to answer this broadly, just focus on this or that. You see, the examiner is stepping in and filling the silence for you. They are giving you hints. They are being supportive. They are helping you out a little bit. And that's a good sign, because they wouldn't do this if they didn't want to help you. They wouldn't do this if they want you to fail. So notice this. If an examiner fills the silence for you, rephrases their question for you, clarifies their question for you, gives you hints or examples of what they're looking for, those are usually good signs. A good response on your part would be, thank you, that clarification helps. In this case, my answer would be this or that, so on and so forth. Number 4, they move on instead of circling around the same unresolved issue. This is a meaningful indicator because it shows whether or not your answers are landing. Sometimes students feel that the thesis defense is going well only if the examiners ask no difficult questions, but that is not realistic. Examiners ask questions, that's their job, and likely they will ask difficult and unexpected questions for which you are not fully prepared. I've talked about this in other videos, that there will very likely be questions that you did not fully prepare for. That's completely normal. What is more important to consider is this. After you have addressed their difficult or challenging questions, do they keep pressing the same point repeatedly, or do they move on to the next subject? Usually, if an examiner keeps asking follow-up questions on the same point, it likely means that they are not satisfied with your answer yet. They may think that there is still something unclear, or something that doesn't quite connect, or something that does not sound fully logical, so they keep pressing you. But if they raise the question, you answer it, they go, "Very well, thank you," and move on to the next subject. That is likely a good sign, indicating that your answer landed. Number 5, they challenge specific choices, but not the whole thesis. This is also a very good sign, even though it may not feel like that in the moment. During your thesis defense, examiners may challenge your research method, your sampling technique, your data analysis, your conclusions and recommendations. That's normal. That's exactly what examiners are supposed to do. They go through the grading sheet and test whether you understand these different decisions you made and those different steps you took. They move from topic to topic. Just because they're questioning you on all these different things doesn't mean they have found problems in all these different things. What is of more potential concern is if the examiners are attacking the overall foundation of your research or challenging the logical connections among the different aspects and components of the thesis. Those are more fundamental issues which are difficult to explain away as minor errors or limitations. So, as long as the examiner sort of goes through their checklist, inquires about specific choices you made on different elements of your work, but the discussion is still focused, concrete, and academic, that's usually a sign that your thesis defense is going just the way it's supposed to. It indicates that the examiners have not found any fundamental or foundational issues with your work, which is good. Number 6, they talk about limitations as limitations, not as fatal mistakes. This is an important sign. During your thesis defense, you may need to explain certain weaknesses in your study. Maybe your sample size was moderate, maybe your data were messy, maybe your analysis could have been deeper and stronger. As a student, you would probably try to frame these issues and weaknesses as potential limitations, and that is usually the right thing to do, because a limitation is not the same as a fatal mistake. A limitation means this is a boundary of the study. This affects how far we can interpret the findings. This tells us what the research can and cannot be used for. That's a limitation. A fatal mistake means the study failed in some fundamental way. It failed to answer the research question, or the data don't support the conclusion, or the whole research design is fundamentally flawed. So these are very different things. Limitations are not fatal mistakes. If you explain a weakness as a limitation and the examiner seems to accept that framing, that is usually a good sign. For example, if you say, yes, my sample size was moderate, so I would be careful not to overgeneralize my findings beyond this organizational context. And the examiner responds, okay, so this is mainly a limitation in terms of generalizability. Well, that's a good sign. If they echo, mirror, and accept your framing of the issue as a relevant limitation, that usually indicates that they are not viewing the issue as a fundamental and fatal flaw. In other words, if the conversation is centered around potential limitations, interpretation, caution, and future improvement and future research, rather than failure, invalidity, or fundamental collapse, that may be a sign that you are actually defending your work pretty well. The key is not to pretend that weaknesses don't exist, because every study has weaknesses and limitations. The key is whether or not we can convince the examiners that the weakness is a limitation, not a fatal mistake. If the examiner seems to accept that framing, that is a good sign. So, to sum up, these are 6 signs that your thesis defense may be going better than you think. And please do not treat this video as a magical checklist where you count the signs during the thesis defense and calculate your probability of passing. That would be a bit too much. The point of this video is this. A thesis defense can feel uncomfortable even when it is going reasonably well. Difficult questions, serious phases, power imbalance, and critical remarks are not automatically signs of failure. Sometimes they are simply part of a serious but formal research conversation. So despite your nervousness and the tense atmosphere, if you are still answering, if the examiners are still listening, and if the discussion is still moving forward, then maybe, just maybe, things are going better than you think. What sign would make you feel most reassured during a thesis defense? Or if you have already done your thesis defense, what happened that made you realize that it was going well? As always, I invite you to leave your thoughts and comments down below. Please also check out my other videos on thesis defense and academic evaluation. I am sure you will find them interesting and useful. Thanks for watching this Ranywayz random video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.